Hello, friends. Okay, let me ask you a question. How many of you think your brain is just sitting up there, completely exposed, with every chemical, toxin, virus, and mystery ingredient from modern life just walking right in? That'd be a terrible design. Your brain is the most important organ you've got. Nature knew that. So your body built its own private security system. So today we're going to talk about that security system, the blood-brain barrier. But here's where it gets interesting. Scientists are discovering that this barrier isn't as impenetrable as we once thought. Under certain conditions, it can become more permeable. And when that happens, substances that normally stay out may gain greater access to brain tissue. Now, before anybody panics, this isn't a presentation about fear. This is about understanding biology. Because once you understand how your body's protective systems work, you also start understanding why things like sleep, stress, diet, inflammation, exercise, and environmental exposures can all matter in ways most people never connect. Oh, and if you've seen some of my other presentations, you already know how this goes. I'm Valerie Robitaille, and I spend my time looking for patterns the body leaves behind instead of chasing isolated symptoms. Because your body isn't random, it's trying to tell you a story. So let's see what the brain's security system has been trying to tell us. Okay, so what exactly is this thing? It's actually a microscopic layer of specialized cells lining the tiny blood vessels in your brain. Think of it more like the world's pickiest nightclub. Everything that wants to get into your brain has to come up to the front door. Who are you? What do you want? Do you belong here? Glucose? Come on in. The brain needs fuel. Oxygen? Absolutely. Certain amino acids? Yep, you're on the list. But bacteria, many toxins, large proteins, and a whole bunch of medications, sorry, you're not getting past the bouncer. And here's the really amazing part. Your brain only weighs about 3 pounds, but it uses roughly 20% of your body's energy. It's incredibly active, incredibly delicate, and it has to be protected every second of every day. So this barrier isn't just a wall, it's an intelligent filter, and it's constantly deciding what gets in, what stays out, and what gets escorted back to the exit. Now, here's where the mystery starts. What happens when that filter doesn't work as well as it should? And that's where things get really interesting. But first, here's the part that blew my mind. This security guard isn't standing there by himself. There's an entire security team. First, you've got the cells lining the blood vessels. They're called endothelial cells. Normally, cells have little gaps between them, but not these guys. They squeeze together so tightly that almost nothing can slip between them. Scientists actually call those seals tight junctions. And I love that name because that's exactly what they are. Imagine taking every crack in your front door and your windows, your basement, and sealing every single one shut. That's what the brain does. Then you've got these star-shaped helper cells called astrocytes. Think of them like the supervisors. They're constantly talking to the barrier, helping it stay healthy and telling it how tight those seals need to be. And then there are the pericytes. They're like the maintenance crew. They help keep the blood vessels strong and stable and properly repaired. So this isn't just a wall, it's a living, breathing security system. Security guards, supervisors, maintenance workers, constant communication. Your brain didn't throw up a fence and hope for the best. It built one of the most sophisticated filtration systems in the entire human body. And here's the million-dollar question. If all of these systems are working together to keep the brain protected, what happens when something starts interfering with them? Okay, so we've got this incredible security system. The obvious question is, can anything get past it? And the answer is sometimes. Now, when people hear the term leaky brain, they picture giant holes opening up in the barrier. But that's not really what's happening. Think back to our security checkpoint. The guards are still there. The doors are still there. But they're not doing their job quite as well. Maybe the guards are distracted or the doors don't close as tightly. Maybe too many people are trying to get through all at once. Scientists call this increased permeability. In plain English, the barrier becomes a little less selective, a little less picky, a little more likely to let things pass that normally wouldn't. And that doesn't automatically mean disease or symptoms. It simply means one of the brain's most important protective systems isn't functioning at its best. And here's what's really fascinating. Researchers have found that many completely different things can nudge the barrier in that direction. Not just one thing, many things. Which brings us to the next question. Who's putting pressure on the brain's security team? Well, it turns out quite a few things. Not one magic bullet, not one evil villain. Think of it like this. If you only have one person trying to sneak through airport security, no big deal. But now imagine thousands, day after day. Eventually, the security team starts getting overwhelmed. The blood-brain barrier is a lot like that. Research suggests a variety of biological stressors may influence how well it functions. Things like chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, poor sleep, chronic psychological stress, high blood sugar, certain infections, environmental toxins, and even aging. Notice something? None of those are diseases. They're pressures. They all make the security team work harder. And sometimes it handles the workload just fine. Sometimes, over time, the system becomes a little less efficient. And that's why functional health is so interesting. Instead of asking, what's the one thing causing this? We start asking, what are all the little pressures adding up over time? Because biology usually isn't about one big event. It's about thousands of tiny events happening every single day. So now we know the security team can get overwhelmed. And the next question is, why do we care so much if that happens? Why are scientists paying so much attention to this? Because if the brain's security system isn't working quite as well, the brain has to deal with things it would rather not deal with. Now remember, we're not talking about a brick wall collapsing. We're talking about a filter becoming a little less selective. That means more immune activity, more inflammation, more oxidative stress, and more work for brain cells that are already incredibly busy. Think about owning a house. If your roof develops one tiny leak, your house doesn't collapse overnight. But if that leak keeps dripping day after day and month after month, eventually you start seeing damage in places that seem completely unrelated. And that's how biology often works. Small changes repeated over long periods of time can have surprisingly large effects. In fact, researchers have been studying blood-brain barrier dysfunction in a wide variety of neurological conditions, not because it's necessarily the cause, but because it may be one important piece of a much larger puzzle. That's a really important distinction. biology is rarely one cause. It's usually many systems interacting with one another, which leads us to one of the most interesting questions in modern neuroscience. Can we actually support this barrier? Now, for the question everybody wants answered, can we actually do anything about this? The encouraging answer is researchers are actively studying ways to support the blood-brain barrier. But notice I said support, not magically fix, not guarantee, support. And when you look at the research, something really interesting shows up. It's the same things we keep seeing over and over in functional medicine. Quality sleep, regular physical activity, keeping blood sugar reasonably stable, eating foods rich in colorful plant compounds, managing chronic stress, reducing unnecessary exposure to environmental toxins, and supporting a healthy gut microbiome. Sound familiar? That's because your body doesn't have separate instruction manuals. The gut talks to the immune system talks to the brain talks to hormones. Everything is connected. And when you support the health of the whole system, you're often supporting the blood-brain barrier too. It's almost disappointing. People are waiting for the one miracle supplement, the one secret ingredient, the one magic hack. Instead, biology keeps saying, take care of the system, because healthy systems protect themselves remarkably well. And that brings us to something encouraging. Scientists are now discovering that certain nutrients and natural compounds may directly help support the barrier itself. Once scientists realized the blood-brain barrier could change, the next question became, can certain nutrients help support it? And the answer is yes. Researchers are investigating quite a few of them. Things like omega-3 fatty acids, polyphenols from berries, curcumin from turmeric, resveratrol from grapes, green tea compounds, vitamin D, magnesium, and several others. Now, before anybody runs out and buys every supplement on the internet, that's not the point. None of these are magic bullets, and none of them replace the basics we just talked about. Think of them as tools. If you're trying to build a house, having a really good hammer is helpful. But if the foundation is sinking, that hammer isn't going to solve your problem. And that's why I always start with the big picture. Sleep, nutrition, movement, stress, blood sugar, environmental exposures. Then, if appropriate, specific nutrients that may provide additional support. The body almost always responds better when we strengthen the entire system instead of trying to force one pathway. And that brings us to something that's received a tremendous amount of attention over the last several years: environmental toxins and the blood-brain barrier. Now, let's connect this to the bigger picture. One of the reasons scientists are so interested in the blood-brain barrier is because we're surrounded by environmental chemicals, heavy metals, air pollution, certain pesticides, industrial chemicals, even tiny particles called microplastics. Now, here's something that's really important. I'm not saying every one of these gets into your brain. That's exactly what the blood-brain barrier is trying to prevent. But researchers are asking two very important questions. Can some of these substances affect the barrier itself? And if the barrier is already under stress, does that change what gets through? Those are active areas of research. Now, what's fascinating is that many environmental toxins appear to affect the same biological pathways we've been talking about all along: oxidative stress, inflammation, mitochondrial function, immune signaling, blood vessel health. In other words, the barrier doesn't exist by itself. It's part of a much bigger network. And the healthier that network is, the better equipped it is to protect your brain. So instead of looking at one chemical or one disease or one symptom or one exposure, I think it's much more useful to ask, how resilient is the system that's supposed to protect me? And that's a very different question. And in my opinion, it's a much more productive one. How do we know what's going on inside an individual person? And this is where functional testing can be helpful. This is an anonymized example of the same person tested months apart. The first test showed several areas that deserved attention: environmental toxins, heavy metals, and a mycotoxin marker. Now, this doesn't mean everyone needs this exact test, and it certainly doesn't mean everyone will have the same results. I'm showing it for one reason: to illustrate how testing can reveal patterns that you simply can't see from the outside. And once we have information, we can build a plan. Reduce exposures where possible, support nutrition, support detoxification pathways, support the body's own resilience. And then, after giving the body time to respond, we measure again. In this example, you can see fewer environmental toxin findings, no heavy metals remaining in the suboptimal range, and no mycotoxin markers outside the reference range. And that's encouraging, not because we chase lab numbers, but because we can objectively measure whether the plan is moving in the right direction. That's how I use functional testing. Not to diagnose people, not to replace good medical care, but to gather information, recognize patterns, and help guide better decisions. So here's what I'd like you to take away from today. Your brain isn't defenseless. It has one of the most remarkable security systems in the human body. Every second of every day, the blood-brain barrier is making thousands of decisions about what gets in and what stays out. The problem is that security system doesn't work in isolation. It depends on healthy blood vessels and mitochondria, balanced inflammation, a healthy gut, good nutrition, quality sleep, and minimizing unnecessary environmental exposures. And that's why I don't spend my time chasing diagnoses, because when the body starts struggling, it usually leaves clues long before a diagnosis appears. And that's where functional testing can be incredibly valuable. It's not about finding one magic answer. It's about gathering information, because the more clearly we understand what's happening inside your body, the more intelligently we can support it. The blood-brain barrier is one remarkable example of how the body protects itself, but it's only one chapter in a much bigger story. The body is constantly communicating through inflammation, through nutrients, hormones, the gut, the immune system. My job isn't to chase isolated symptoms. It's to recognize the patterns the body is already showing us. Because everybody has a story, and the better we learn to read that story, the better equipped we are to support health. So before we finish, I'd like to leave you with one thought. For most of my life, I looked at health the way most people do. One symptom, one diagnosis, one pill, one specialist after another. But the longer I've studied biology, the more I've realized that the body isn't failing us. It's communicating with us. Every change, every adaptation, every symptom is part of a conversation. The blood-brain barrier isn't just protecting your brain. Your immune system is protecting you. Your liver is protecting you. Your kidneys are protecting you. Your gut is protecting you. Your hormones are constantly adapting to keep you alive. Your body is working for you, even when it doesn't feel like it. Sometimes those protective systems become overwhelmed, and sometimes they need support, sometimes they need time, and sometimes they simply need someone willing to listen. And that's why I do what I do. I don't see people as a collection of diagnoses. I see stories, stories that are written in biology, stories that are written in laboratory patterns, stories that are written in nutrition, stress, sleep, environmental exposures, and most important, resilience. Every person who walks through my door has a story. And I believe that when we stop fighting the body and start listening to what it's been trying to tell us all along, we give ourselves the opportunity to heal in ways we never expected. So thank you for spending this time with me. I hope the next time you hear the words blood-brain barrier, you won't just think about the brain, you'll think about the incredible intelligence of the human body. Take care of it. It's been taking care of you your entire life.